Welcome everybody to SKC Office Hours. I'm Sarah Krom, Managing Partner of SKC & Co CPAs. As I was just informed, this is our 30th Office Hours, so celebration for our anniversary. A few housekeeping issues if you haven't joined us before. We encourage you to ask questions and participate via the chat today. We want to make this as meaningful as possible. We also try to make it as interactive as possible. So we will pop a few polls up in the chat today to get the pulse of the audience. This is being recorded, so anyone who you think might be interested and couldn't make today's presentation, it will be sent out to all attendees and registrants later on. And it'll also be archived on our website, so you can share it with a colleague there, or you can revisit it yourself at a later date. So let's jump in, shall we? If you've heard me speak before, whether on Office Hours or somewhere else, you've heard me say that people over profits is sort of the best way I feel to run a business. And SKC has dedicated the year of 2024 to the year of our people. So today's office hour is going to be a little bit about that. It's going to be about providing a 5-star experience to both your internal team and your external clients or customers. So curating these first-class experiences has to be very intentional and focused. And so here today to help us work through not only the importance of what I recently learned is referred to as either the client X or the employee X, which is the experience, as well as how to work the white glove experience into your strategic plan, is Emily Gasparro. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you.
So Emily is the founder and CEO of Gasparro Business Consulting, and there she advises clients on building a strong and successful business culture. She focuses on culture enhancement, training, and process improvement. So happy to have you here on this Friday, Emily.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you all.
So let's kick off the meat of the presentation with a little bit of a poll, shall we, Brittany, if you don't mind? So just to kind of get an understanding of where you and your organization might be, does your company have an intentional culture by design, or is it just a culture by default? It would be interesting to poll your teams and see if they feel the same way as the business owner feels. Brittany, whenever you're ready or you feel like we've got some good responses back based on our participants, feel free to share. All right, so people have it going on. We've got 89% say that they have an intentional culture and 11% say they have a culture by default. So people are in the right headspace and they're here to learn a little bit more about how to be even better with that. So interesting poll results, Emily. But let's make sure everyone's on the same page and the same playing field here. And let's kind of just open up with the definition of culture that we're going to be sort of referring to for the next hour.
Thanks, Sarah. Sure. So in the simplest terms, culture is what we do. The term culture itself comes from the Latin root word cultus, which means to care for. So culture is an active process of nurturing and caring for the environment in which we work and we interact. Now, our culture is made up of behaviors, processes, and practices that shape how an organization operates. When those are consistently connected to each other and connected to an organizational system, they become reinforcing components that compose the structure of your culture and also create your experience. Now, it's important to know there's always culture occurring in every organization. Culture is how work happens between people. It's every interaction that happens, every decision that is made, whether it's in person or it's remote. It's what we do way more than what we have. So if you do not have an experience standard in place, that means your culture has evolved naturally, often haphazardly or in an unstructured way without intention or purpose. And that means you're operating on a culture by default. And so because you have no intention to begin with, there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences as a result. By contrast, culture by design is a deliberate effort to create an environment that aligns with an organization's goals and values. And that's what we're looking at today. Culture by design and the experience you can create. We want to think about being intentional when you're crafting your culture, so you can create a white glove experience for everyone who works in or with your organization. How you shape your culture, your behaviors, your processes, your practices is going to dictate the experience an individual has when they come in contact with your business. Now, harnessing your behaviors and practices is a skill set, of course, and like any skill, it can be done well or it can be done poorly. Humans instinctively know the difference. You've experienced good cultures and bad cultures. You know what they are. You know what a warm, energetic culture feels like. You know what a dysfunctional and weak environment feels like. And you probably know every experience in between. But what you may not consider is how much power you have to design and strengthen and transform your group's experience if you become intentional with your actions.
So it's so interesting because I feel like the term experience is fairly new when we talk about a culture, whether it's again for our internal team or what's happening with our clients and the feelings that our clients and our customers get. So can you talk a little bit about the value to creating an experience through culture? Because I think culture as a thought has been around a lot longer than incorporating experiences into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So experience is the next step of culture, right? Creating an experience through culture has immense value. It can take a simple transaction and change it into a memorable event, which is going to foster connection. When clients and team members feel valued and cared for, they're more likely to return, even if the product itself isn't the best they've ever had, or even if the industry they're working in isn't their first choice. It's about building a relationship and an emotional connection with your client and your team members, ensuring that they feel seen and heard and appreciated. That's what's going to differentiate your business in a crowded market. It's what leads to long-term success and a loyal base of support. I'm certain everyone here has decided they're no longer going to patronize one business or another in their life. And I want you to all ask yourself, did you get to that point because of the product or because of the experience? Let's kind of walk through an experience that we've all had, right? Let's say two restaurants come highly recommended to you for their exceptional food and you decide you're going to try them both. When you go to the first restaurant, you walk in and the host barely acknowledges you. You're standing at the door sort of awkwardly waiting for someone to notice you. Finally, when you get a table, it hasn't properly been cleaned and you have to wait for your server who seems overwhelmed and frazzled. The dining room is warm, the music is loud, it's difficult to have a conversation. Now, despite all this, let's say the food comes and it's delicious. It exceeds your expectations. However, throughout the meal, your water glass is empty, you struggle to catch the attention of your server to refill it or order another drink. When you're finished eating, your check does not arrive and you have a hard time finding it. You make your way to the host station and they ignore you there as well and you leave. Okay. And let's say you go and try the second restaurant, right? To give that one a shot. And it's a totally different experience. You walk in the door and you're greeted warmly by the host. They show you to your table, which is clean, and your water is filled immediately. The menus are handed to you with a smile. You feel welcomed, you feel relaxed. Your server arrives promptly. They introduce themselves, they take your order. Now, when the food comes, it's fine. It's not terrible, it's not great. But throughout the meal, they're attentive to your needs. You have everything you need without being intrusive. The restaurant has a pleasant atmosphere, the music is comfortable, you're given the check promptly, and when you go to the host station to pay, they thank you for coming and invite you to come back. So ask yourself, which restaurant would you go to again? Which restaurant would you bring someone to? Which restaurant would you recommend? And let's take a look at this and why you've made your decision, because the quality of the food differed, right? We had excellent food in the first, second was okay. However, the overall experience is what made an impact on your perception of each place. The first place, despite delivering the great food, failed to provide you with an experience that you enjoyed due to the service and the ambiance. However, the second restaurant was welcome and attentive, and it left you with a positive impression despite the food. The first restaurant made it difficult for you. The second restaurant provided ease. I use this anecdote because it illustrates that the quality of the product, in this case the food, is important, right? But the overall experience has more of an influence on how your clients and your team perceive and remember the interaction they had with your business. A positive experience includes things like great service and a welcoming atmosphere and attentive to needs. Principle is universal, however, and it's governed by culture. In my case, there is a printing company in my area. It has great prices. It's really convenient, but I don't use them anymore because the woman who answers the phone is rude and I don't like it, right? So while we can think of the restaurant as an experience-based business, the truth is all businesses that prioritize creating a positive, memorable experience for their clients tend to succeed. Everyone is paying for a product or a service, but they're also expecting a great experience regardless of the industry. And so that's why creating an experience Creating ease for your clients and your team members should be a primary focus.
I have so many ways I could take that whole story. I mean, I have probably at least 5 experience stories as a patron of various different vendors over the years, and I won't take up the time today to share those. But what you said in the earlier segment where you were talking about the definition of culture, right? And we talked about how if you're not intentional about it, a culture will be created without your awareness, right? And so sort of in that example of the 2 different restaurants that you gave, I feel that, I can't imagine any business owner would intentionally create a culture of dismissiveness and rudeness, right? So if that's not something that is part of your value system and something that you instill in the culture of your team in a service business, that's not something that they are then able to successfully project consistently to the customers or the clients.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I talk about with our team at SKC about sort of that 5-star first class type of service. And, it's something that in the world where we're very technology driven now and things are automated and very limited on the relationship front, I look at relationships as a differentiator for SKC and how we service our clients. And, I always say, there's only so many seats in first class. And if you look at the first class seats and you look at the coach seats, there's a lot more coach seats, right? So people are willing to pay a premium for that different type of experience and for that, first class, world class type, treatment, if you will. So without question, it's incredibly important. But how does a business owner start with this, right? How do we cultivate a white glove experience as a business owner? We need to understand the needs of the employee and the client as the foundation, but how do we identify the needs of these 2 diverse groups in starting this creation of an ideal culture?
So this is data collection, right? And I'm sure all the data people are excited, but in this case, we're talking about qualitative data, right? So quantitative data would be numerical information. That's your KPIs and your sale metrics. What we're looking for is qualitative data, which provides the non-numerical insights like opinions and behaviors and motivations. And we garner these through descriptive and interpretive means like interviews or open-ended questions or even observations. Bottom line is your clients and your team members are the stakeholders of your business, and the voice of the stakeholder is paramount. You want to collect as much feedback as possible, and frankly, you can't have too much. So we want to conduct thorough audits of both the employee and the client experience. And this is how you identify on the micro level what the issues are, determine the gap of where you want to be and where you are at the moment. This means collecting data from onboarding to completion and measuring what's in place. So if you're wondering how to go about doing this, the first thing I think is really important to recognize is your team members have a wealth of knowledge about both the client and the team member experience, right? So leadership might assume that the big picture provides you with a better frame of reference, but I can tell you nothing surpasses the everyday experience of your team members, and you want them to feel empowered in expressing themselves. So creating a safe space is how you're going to harness that knowledge. And this goes back to psychological safety. It's crucial to embrace the messenger. We say don't shoot them. I say embrace them, because employees often try to manage impressions and they'll withhold feedback because they don't want to appear negative or intrusive. So valuing their feedback is essential in allowing them to know they can safely talk about shortcomings, right? And you want to find a way to build collecting their feedback consistently into their experience. Beyond this, small focus groups, one-on-one interviews to gather more detailed feedback is helpful. Or AARs, which are after action reviews. It's something that they do in the military. Navy SEALs have perfected it. And that's when you finish an initiative, a group will get together and circle around 3 questions, right? Which is what went well, what didn't go well, and what are we going to do differently next time? This is a great way to audit where you're currently at, but to also cultivate safety at the same time. Additionally, creating dedicated teams or appointing special people on this endeavor can help maintain focus and consistency throughout the experience. Now, client feedback is usually garnered through surveys, and I think surveys are great, and I recommend everyone use them as much as they can, but we also know that they're often overlooked by consumers, right? So you want to think about workarounds there. I suggest implementing verbal check-ins with every client at most touch points with subsequent documentation of their response in a central location. In fact, asking clients how they're feeling throughout the experience should be a tenet of your strategy from onboarding to completion. And it's as simple as asking, how has your experience been working with us so far? And documenting their response. I also recommend businesses consider a secret shopper approach, having a neutral party go through the client experience and report back how it was. But what's most important to consider is none of this is for crime and punishment, right? We're never going to take this information to criticize or judge or assign blame. We're using feedback as a preventative means, not a reactionary means. We don't want to encounter negative feedback at any turn, right? But once we receive it, we want to use it for the future and not punish the past. These are the people you cater to and the ones you work for, and you can't exist without them. So you want to create a safe space for their voice, and you want to collect it as much as possible.
And I think that's so important is really how are you getting the data, right? Because whether we're talking quantitative data or qualitative data, we know that if it's not good data, if it's not good information, we're not making good decisions off of it, or we're making the wrong decisions off of it. And some of the things that we've done at SKC from both the internal team and the client facing perspective is exactly what you said. We've done surveys. We've done actually outsourced surveys. We call them listening tours on the client side, where we've had an outside non-SKC party reach out with sort of a set number of questions to, have a verbal dialogue with, a sample of clients to get some feedback and understanding for us to implement any kind of changes and sort of get a pulse on how we're doing across, the different service levels for our clients. And internally, we've done anonymous surveys for the most part, because you want to be able to sort of set yourself up to get the best feedback and the most honest feedback, which in most cultures is done anonymously because that's just where people feel most comfortable for the most part. But again, I think that what you're advocating, and I agree with you, is that it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be not, okay, we listened to this really great office hour, so in August, we're going to do these surveys, and then we never do surveys again, right? It's got to be something that's consistent. And I know a lot of companies internally do something called a net promoter score, which is sort of just this one question for your team of, would you recommend that one of your friends or family work here? And then you kind of rank it on a scale and it generates a net promoter score. And again, that's talking about quantitative data, right? We need open-ended questions in this journey, and we need, words to be able to build upon. Getting numerical rankings is a starting point, but it's not going to help us make changes because we're not really understanding the deep needs of, I'll call it the end user, whether the end user is our internal team or whether the end user is our clients or customers. So I would say it's a big undertaking, especially if you want it to be done well and consistently. So Emily, if a business owner doesn't have a team or a team experience plan or a client experience plan, do you recommend them starting with one group versus the other? Because it seems daunting to try to build something from nothing all at once.
Yeah, I do. So, clients are king, but I actually recommend starting with the team experience plan first, right? And it's a foundational approach. We want happy, well-supported employees, and that's naturally going to extend the positive energy to your clients. We can't expect people who are undervalued or who aren't engaged to deliver exceptional service. And we've all experienced unhappy employees in our lives, and so we know they don't, right? And that's because of social and emotional contagion. We pick up on each other's emotions and behaviors unconsciously. So even if we can't pinpoint why, we feel the negativity in the interaction. The same way a yawn can trigger a mimic yawn, right? Interacting with someone who's feeling negative is going to leave us with negativity. So it's similar to the oxygen mask first. We want to put that on before assisting other, and focusing on your team first is going to set that stage for success. And what's also important, and I touched on this a bit, is listening to your employees is going to open up the dialogue for your clients, right? Frontline employees have direct insights into what the clients are looking for and what improvements can be made. So the feedback's invaluable in crafting a client strategy plan as well. So that's why I would definitely recommend starting with the team first, take care of in-house, and then spread from there.
Do you feel that it makes the most sense to try to outsource sort of this foundational information gathering, or do you think that a business owner can sort of start the process internally and hope for the best, most honest feedback? What are your thoughts on doing it internally versus sort of hiring a consultant and getting a third party in?
I think it's about creating trust, right? So whether you hire a third party or you do it yourself, if your team doesn't trust you and doesn't trust you're going to take that information and use it for good, they're not going to give it to you or to anyone you bring in. So I think what's most important is to establish trust, and you can do that by continuing to show your team that being vulnerable and expressing shortcomings doesn't result in crime and punishment. It isn't going to make a difference if you hire someone from outside or you do it yourself. If your team is frightened that there's going to be some consequence of releasing this information, they're not going to release it.
And I think another element of building trust over time is actually implementing things that are recommended, right? So whether there are these formal surveys where we're talking about building a foundation of understanding the needs so we can create and curate an experience for our team members, but it's also about proving over the long term that when somebody makes a recommendation, even outside of this structure, you're listening and you're implementing it, or you're at least following up and, going back to them. I remember once a client was doing sort of a team-wide survey because they wanted to add on some additional perks and benefits to the team, but they didn't really know what would be most meaningful to them. So they kind of did a perks and benefits survey. What would be the most meaningful thing, and a good portion of their team members came back and said, we would really like to have our birthday off. Probably like 60% of the survey respondents gave that as a perk that they were interested in. And I was meeting with management going over the survey, and the management team decided, we're not going to do that. And I said, okay, well, hold on, before we make that rash decision, I said, you intentionally put forth this survey to get feedback from your team because you wanted to add benefits to them. If you're going to take the highest ranked response and shut it down within 10 seconds of reading it, we need to rethink the thought process behind this whole attempt here, right? And so we kind of worked through that a little bit. And I think that's something that's important to mention in this discussion is, if you're going to ask for feedback and you're going to ask for these wants and needs and start to build that foundation, I'm certainly not suggesting you need to make every improvement and take every recommendation that's made, but you have to be willing and in a position to implement change so that there's that trust that what we've come back with and what we've given to management is being heard and acknowledged and dealt with. And in my close to the management team, I said to them, if you're not going to go this route and implement this benefit of having your birthday off, then you've got to go back to the team and say, listen, these are the survey results. These are the things we're implementing, and these are the things we're not implementing. And here's why we're not implementing them. So at least they understand that it was looked at, it was evaluated, it was talked about, as opposed to just, nope, we're not doing that and moving on, because that sort of just breaks the whole system apart.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're going to be looking for answers, right, there's got to be purpose behind it. And we certainly don't want to pose any questions that we're not willing to accept the answers to.
Exactly. But what if we're in a situation where we can't get consistent responses from either the client audience or the internal team? How do we start building a white glove experience without having a full database of responses?
Well, the good news is we're talking about design, right? Culture is what you do. So without any intel, you can model the experience you want to cultivate. You can adopt the policies and attitudes you want to become diligent in and implement them. I do recommend sort of a few steps or a few ways to get there. And I think what's important to consider to begin is you want to start where you're at, right? It's tempting to assume that there's these great cultures in this utopia where everybody's happy and everything's friction-free. There's no problems, there's no disagreements, right? But I want to emphasize that's not true, and that's not what we're trying to attain. So don't start out chasing this tension-free sort of fantasy, because you're going to end up frustrated. Strong cultures wrestle with problems, disagreements, and failures all the time. The difference is the strong cultures experience these problems and disagreements within the bonds of strong connection, right? And they use them as leverage to learn and improve. So we want to reach not for perfection, but we want to just take a skills-based approach and begin reflecting on where our group is strong and where our group is weak, right? Maybe we're great at creating belonging, but we struggle with consistency, or we're good at demonstrating vulnerability, but not so good at empowerment. So you want to start by building your strengths and then addressing your weaknesses. It's also important to keep in mind, while culture and experience are, meant to apply to everyone, bias and unfairness can be baked into institutions and processes, right? In a variety of ways. So it's really crucial when you're building something like this to keep diversity, equality, and inclusion at the fore. Some of you, particularly leaders, I would assume, might be tempted to sort of construct this like top-down sort of culture improvement for your group. I would say resist that temptation. Organizations do not improve culture by compliance, right? They need to co-create and share the path and navigate it together. So from there, you want to start to build your vision and build your mission. You want to define your core values that's going to guide your organizations. And these values should reflect what you stand for, but also what we aspire to be. You want to lay out your strategy and your blueprint, and then you're going to flesh that out to create the guidelines to support this initiative you've created. Your service strategy should have things like a mission statement, hierarchy, structure, support goals, tools and the programs you want to use, tracking metrics, right? And the spend you're going to allocate, and that's time, and that's also resources. The next thing that's really important when you're starting this journey, the most important, I think, is providing your team with the training and resources they need to have a clear understanding of your culture and to model it. Employee empowerment is a huge driver of business success. It fosters culture of trust, autonomy, and innovation. Empowered individuals are given authority and confidence to make decisions and solve problems and take initiatives. And the sense of ownership and responsibility doesn't only boost morale and job satisfaction, but it's going to enhance your client experience as well. Empowered people contribute ideas and solutions, and they're going to align their personal goals with the company's objectives. They're more likely to make improvements, and they're more likely to give you the quick results you need. So taking that step alone is already setting the stage for a great team member experience. And your clients are going to appreciate that your team is trained and empowered. Just an example to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about when I say empowering your team, a great one that's a real big win-win is the Ritz-Carlton. So since the 80s, the Ritz has offered its staff a $2,000 per incident fee, or payout rather, to resolve any customer complaint in any way they see fit, doesn't matter, right? Now, the $2,000 is rarely used. The average amount is much lower, but the approach motivates and empowers the team members to make on-the-spot decisions, and then they promptly resolve guest issues. So these employees are empowered to take action independently, regardless of their position, and they don't need approval from higher management. So all of these are things to consider. We want to start where we are. We want to map where we need to go. And even though it's tempting to put up red tape, for protection when we have new initiatives, we want to do the opposite and actually loosen the reins.
So I think if we're sort of starting at ground zero, if you will, and ultimately we're dealing with people, right? And there's lots of psychology and research behind what people's needs are, even if you're not getting good responses in a survey or one-on-ones or focus groups or things like that. So just to kind of pivot to a little bit of psychology to sort of do a bit of a culture check within your organization to make sure you're covering some of these basic human needs. And that's to talk a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Emily, do you mind sort of walking us through that concept and how that could be a good foundation to building an internal culture?
Not at all. It's my pleasure, actually, because I really enjoy looking at our needs this way, right? So Maslow's hierarchy is a comprehensive framework for understanding human needs, and it does so in order of importance. It's a model that allows us to understand how vital human connection is to our overall well-being and survival. So for those that don't know, the 5 stages go like this, right? The first would be your physiological needs. So that's your basics: food, shelter, water. Once those are met, then we have to worry about your safety needs. So in our case, we're talking about like job security or safety from physical harm or a stable environment. Number 3 would be love and belonging needs. So these are the interpersonal relationships, friendships, intimacy, and a connection with others. 4th, we have the need for respect, like recognition, a sense of accomplishment. And if we meet all of those needs, then we can try to attain the 5th, which would be self-actualization, which is, where we're trying to realize our personal potential and get self-fulfillment and seek personal growth. Now, as I said, what I love about this is how much it highlights the need of human connection, because we all understand the basic needs of survival: food, shelter, water, but how often do we consider these other fundamental needs for ourselves and the people around us? One movie that illustrates this for me that I love is Castaway. It's kind of an old movie now, which is strange, but if you've seen it, the main character played by Tom Hanks is shipwrecked on an island, right? And he manages to miraculously secure the basic needs. He gets food, he gets shelter, he gets water, but he doesn't stop there, right? From there, he feels compelled to take a volleyball, paint a face on it, and create a character or a companion named Wilson. Why? To fulfill his need for human connection, right? Because the basics are not enough. We all have that fundamental need, and that all of us need to have it met. So I love thinking about human connection as an essential need, just like food or water or shelter. It helps us consider our daily interactions and how we facilitate human connection for people around us. So today, I'm sure you're going to make sure you drink enough water, you eat enough food, but are you going to check in on the connections you had and see if you created belonging or you created connection around you? When it comes to team members and their needs, what this means is we're going to start with their basic needs, right? Which we hope are already in place. That's fair wages, safe working conditions, job security. And once those are in place, then we're going to focus on the high level needs like belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And we can do that through career development or recognition programs. Similarly, the Maslow hierarchy for clients would mean providing them with reliable and high quality products or services. And then after that, thinking about belonging and loyalty and personalized experience and exceptional customer service. So it's worth taking a moment and asking yourself if you've considered the people around you's needs beyond just the fundamental. We want to start asking ourselves questions, right? Do our team members feel like they belong? Do they feel like they have a shared future with your organization? Do clients feel acknowledged and safe when they're working with you? And then maybe we even want to go a step further, right? We want to start asking those questions and then see maybe what we can do about it. So think about one person in your group who doesn't speak up as often as you think they should. What could you do to let them know that their voice is needed and appreciated? Or maybe think of a behavior you could adopt tomorrow to increase the sense of safety or belonging in your group. It's this approach, considering the needs of others, that's going to foster long-term satisfaction and loyalty. By understanding and addressing our foundational needs and then tackling the other stages, we can create a robust and effective white glove service and experience for everyone.
Thank you for that. And I think it's important to sort of have that little bit of psychology and understanding of basic human needs in this presentation, because that's where you're going to start. And then from there, you're sort of going to build whatever data you can get through what we were speaking about earlier, the surveys, the one-on-ones, the focus groups, the listening tours, things like that. But we all have to satisfy at least the basic human needs. And, to your point, we hope that most of those are already fulfilled in the culture that exists within your organization. But let's take this opportunity to throw up another poll question of whether or not you have a clear idea of the needs of your team or your client. Again, I'd imagine we're all going to rank ourselves very high in this, but we should really be asking our clients and our team members what they think and see where the gap in perception is. That's a valuable exercise to do as well. Brittany, you can feel free to share whenever we have a good response rate in. Okay. All right, so we've got a couple of no's and we've got a couple of nobody saying anything about just the team. So maybe we spend a lot of time thinking about most businesses from a revenue focused perspective, that we're more focused on the client experience than we are on the internal team experience. But I think what you said in the beginning is very important, that we've got to start really with the internal team, because that's where we're going to be able to create an environment that causes even better experiences for our clients and our customers, because we've got a happy team and a fulfilled team working towards the common goal of exceptional white glove client experiences. So just once we've sort of got a plan in place or the framework for a plan, Emily, do we share that with the team or the clients and what this curated experience looks like? Do we let it just happen to them and allow them to sort of experience it and be immersed in it? Is there an official rollout? Where do we go from here once we've sort of got a framework in place?
So both, actually. I think it's important to strike a balance between sharing expectations and allowing immersion, right? So When we clearly outline to team members and clients what they can expect, it's going to set the stage for the positive experience. However, creating opportunities for them to naturally experience those standards in action is going to be more impactful. When it comes to your team members, you want your team members to deeply feel and embody the culture. So broadcasting your values internally is crucial. It's a way to manage expectations effectively. When we communicate our values and standards clearly on the operational side, it's also going to create accountability for everyone, including leadership. So you want to use various platforms to convey the message and ensure that everyone in the organization is aligned with the mission and knows what's expected of them. I like the idea of using intentional language and creating team sayings or team slogans. I also think leadership should take every opportunity, whether it's a presentation, an email, or just a day-to-day conversation, to express the values of the organization. It's easier than you think to get caught up in the primary objective, right? And to lose sight of your culture mission. So keeping the language throughout is a great way to model commitment. But for clients, it's more important for them to feel our commitment and experience it than just being told. So we do want to practice proactive customer service outreach, but our actions should speak louder than words. Clients should experience our standards in action as much as possible. But I would also say intentional language has huge benefits for your clients too, right? So something as simple as replacing "you're welcome" with "my pleasure" can send a message without being direct, right? And the message would be, "I'm comfortable and happy helping you." So you can be indirect in small ways and find ways to tell them all the time. And I think it's great to get really intentional there. And by consistently asking for feedback, which we discussed earlier with your clients, you're going to send the message without even broadcasting it. They will feel your commitment to experience. So yeah, talking about it is going to help set the stage for the experience. But at the same time, it's really important that the standards are experienced naturally and felt in action, both internally and externally.
So I want to kind of share this little anecdote. When one of the things that we are constantly trying to be better at within SKC is our onboarding process, right? So we created an onboarding committee, and we're constantly trying to make that experience better because, after the recruiting process and after the interviewing and the offer letter, that's really the first true touch that a new team member has with your organization. And so I just actually finished reading the book All In by Mike Michalowicz, and it's all about, as a leader, being all in for your team. It's a great book, but he has two really fantastic pieces of advice within that book. And one talks about the first day, right? And it's the number one thing that team members remember. And when you think about it, it's the number one thing that friends and family will ask you once you've started a new job: how was your first day? And so in the book, Mike talks about making the new hire's first day awesome. So that's a challenge in creating that white glove experience from day one for your new team members, right? I mean, and it's something that goes beyond sending them a welcome box or sending them, their HR paperwork to do in advance, or having a team lunch the first day they start. It's a big ask to create the experience of somebody's first day being awesome, right? And so that speaks to the intentionality of culture and how important it is to make it part of your everyday and extract yourself from being in the weeds of doing the work of running your business or servicing clients or putting out fires. But, thinking about that in the back of your mind, that what does it take? What do we have to do as a company, as an organization, as a team to make sure that our new hires have an awesome first day? I'd also argue that you want it to last more than one day, and it shouldn't just be amazing on day one and then it all peters out after that. But, it's a really different way of thinking about it, and sort of having that experience. And, the second piece of advice that he talks about within the team of your organization is understanding your team's appreciation language. So if any of you are familiar with either the love languages, the 5 love languages, that translates into, the business setting as well. There's a version called the appreciation languages. And what is each team member's appreciation language? Do they thrive on words of praise or acts of service? Do they like to be called out in front of the team? Do they like a handwritten note that says, "Hey, you're doing really great"? And I think it's important to curate that team member experience, to really know your team individually so you can properly curate your interactions with them and make it as personalized and meaningful as possible. So Emily, what are your thoughts, I guess, both on the team side of it, right, which is probably different numbers than on the external client side of it, but making something personalized and promoting that belonging within the community?
So I have a lot of thoughts, right? Personalization itself is a belonging cue, and this is a cornerstone of white glove experience and what I do. So when I say belonging cue, I mean the nonverbal signals that we use to create safe connections in groups. And they can be small little markers of positive reinforcement to encourage people to feel included and valued. Now, when they're repeated, belonging cues are going to help shift the brain from a fear of connection to creating psychological safety. You're talking about onboarding in the first day, and it reminded me of one of my favorite case studies, which is Wipro. Now, Wipro is a call center in India, and they had horrible attrition rates, so they decided to try an experiment. And what they did was they split their new trainees into 3 groups, a control group, group 1, and group 2. They had the control go through training as normal. Group 1 went through training and received an additional hour where they received information on the company Wipro itself. So they learned about the trajectory of the company, people that had worked there, all of its history. And group 2, a little different, got the standard training, but then received an hour focused on them, right? So that extra hour included questions like, what makes you most successful and happy at work? Or they did an exercise where they got in a group and said, let's pretend we're stranded at sea. What skill set are you going to bring to get us out of this predicament? And then finally, to personalization especially, they gave them a fleece sweatshirt with Wipro's logo and the employee's first name embroidered. Now, these are small, tiny little variables, but when the results came in from the experiment, group 2, the one who got all the personalized stuff, were 250% more likely to be working at Wipro than group 1, and 150% more likely to work there than the control group. So that 1 hour of personalized training transformed their relationship with the company, right? It increased engagement and it reduced attrition. So it illustrates how tailoring our communication and development plans to individual needs, which you were discussing, shows employees that they're valued and it leads to connection. But there's a great question here, which is how can something so tiny have such a big impact, right? And I think it's crucial to understand the human brain, right? And how that works in interaction. So the amygdala, which is a component of our brain that's like a primeval vigilance device, is like a zebra constantly scanning for danger. And it triggers the fight or flight response when it senses a threat, which is good. We need that. However, what we've recently found is while it's scanning, if there is no threat, it also can start to play a critical role in building social connections. So when individuals receive these belonging cues, that amygdala shifts from a guard dog to a guide dog. And it actually uses all of its power to strengthen the social bond. So it'll turn a group dynamic, ensuring individuals feel connected and engaged. And this transformation internally shifts how people perceive their role, right? From being strangers to being valued team members. So it turns out there's all sorts of positive changes happening when we activate the amygdala's role in social connection. And the approach isn't limited to employees. It's equally vital in the client experience, right? So personalizing client interactions, sending belonging cues, using language that resonates with their values, making them feel like they're part of your business. That's how you create a white glove experience. The message of belonging is we are connected, we share a future, I care about you, you have a voice here, and you matter. So all of that is something to consider. Also, of course, active listening, right? And attention to detail, remembering people's preferences or specific concerns or what they like to be called. Remembering birthdays or special events. It's a really easy way to send a belonging cue. You should have that built into your system, and not just events that pertain to work, personal events as well, right? So it just underscores the importance of understanding the human element in every interaction. And we just learned the next step after the basic need is love and belonging, right? So even the smallest changes have a profound impact when they're connected to the fundamental needs of the human being.
And I think it's so important to reiterate that the experience that we're talking about within the culture is a feeling, right? It's not a list of employee benefit perks, or it's not a list of client service offerings. It's actually the feeling that the individual gets by being part of your community, right? Whether that's your internal team community or your external client community. And I think that's the difference that people may miss, is that it's not just saying, you know, we're going to have the ice cream truck come in August to the office, or we're going to have, you know, a masseuse come, or, you know, we're going to do a team outing to a baseball game. All those things are good and important, but really the end game is what feeling are you giving your team and your clients or your customers that is going to make them feel amazing and want to come back for more? And so I think that's important to kind of make that distinction, right? But selfishly, I do want to throw up this poll because I want to see where everybody else feels about their onboarding experience. Because like I said, we're kind of going through something at SKC with onboarding. So are you happy with the onboarding process at your company? And be honest, don't do it just to make me feel good or bad about myself. I'm just real curious because I don't think it's an easy thing to crack. So I'm just curious where other people sit with it. Whenever you are ready, Brittany. All right. I had absolutely no expectation of how this was going to come back. So I think this is really interesting. It means that I'm pretty much where everybody else is, which I'm okay with, but we're going to crack the code and get better and do better, of course. But so Emily, in the work that you have done in your company, what do you find to be important aspects to focus on when curating these experiences?
Sure. I think there's three that are big that we can discuss briefly. So we want to look at seamlessness, flexibility, and positive reinforcement. And I'll kind of walk you through how you want to do each. When it comes to seamlessness, documenting is key, right? I can't stress that enough. Nothing is worse than repeating yourself or reminding someone of something you've already explained. And documenting in a central location where anyone can pick up from where you left off is important as well. We want a roadmap too, right? So this speaks to our need for future orientation. We want to create roadmaps for our clients so they know what to expect and when. We want to create roadmaps for our team members, whether it's career development or just this is what you're going to experience when you're here roadmap, right? It sends a message that we share a future and I care about how you get through this. And if you don't have a roadmap, you will have detours. So that means your clients are going to need you more, right? Successful business provide regular updates before you have, potential issues or challenges. Anticipate what your client's going to need or what your team member needs to do next and offer them the guidance to get there. Another thing that helps with seamlessness is quick response time, super important, keeping your communications open. Responding promptly to a client or a team member and their inquiries or their feedback is going to show that commitment, right? And if there's anything you can stress to your team when you're working on your client experience, it's that prompt response. So we can reduce the need for this with the roadmap, but ultimately your time to shine is going to be when your client needs you. And even if you can't deliver the resolution, an immediate response is going to give them some satisfaction. Flexible and accommodating policies is really important and a great way to enhance your team member satisfaction and your retention and to boost client engagement, right? So flexible and accommodating policies aren't just for the benefit of them, they're actually strategic and advantage for you and your business. To understand what I mean here, let's look at the opposite of flexibility, right? Which is rigidity. And that feels like a lack of empathy when we encounter it. It feels like it's difficult to understand other people's perspectives or emotions when we feel rigidity. It makes disagreements seem hostile. It includes those words like should and must and always and never. When we experience rigidity, it tends to cause feelings of anxiety and stress, right? So we want to do the opposite of this. So for team members, flexible policies can mean providing things like, flexible work hours or remote work engagements, or maybe just expressing a general sense that you're willing to work with your team if needed, right? Clients, they appreciate businesses that are going to adapt to the preferences and circumstances they have. So maybe under uncertain times, you're going to offer a flexible payment term, or maybe you're going to customize a service option for them, right? That can demonstrate empathy and support. You can also adapt your communication style to match the client's preferences, right? That's another way to be flexible. So if they like emails or they like phone calls or they like Zooms, right? It just helps us meet their needs and their expectations. And flexibility shows we're not committed to rules, right? We're committed to fostering strong relationships. The last thing that I think sets businesses apart in this arena that is the most important and is always overlooked is positive reinforcement and gratitude, right? So although you can change behavior from positive and negative reinforcers, it's the positive reinforcers that are going to have the longer lasting behavior change effects. And that's true with science, even though I feel like no one ever wants to believe that it is. So positive reinforcement is a basic principle of conditioning, right? And it's the introduction of something desirable or pleasant after a behavior, such as a reward. It's not a bribe. Now, you can use it to teach new behaviors or strengthen existing ones. It doesn't matter. But whatever you do, don't get trapped trying to put out fires. Focus on the good. I see this overlooked so much, and I think it's the biggest oversight. So you need positive reinforcement to boost what you were already doing well. And you can get really granular and intentional here, and maybe even automated, right? So you can consider just a positive reinforcement schedule running in the background of your operation. And you can do it on a continuous schedule. So every time you see the behavior, they're rewarded. That's a lot of work. But you could also do a fixed ratio schedule, right? Where if, let's say, your team member gets 3 compliments, they're rewarded. Or a fixed interval, right? So let's say your client's been with you for 5 years, they get some sort of accommodation, whatever feels right. But by being intentional, you ensure the reinforcement is occurring and it's not left to human error. And you've created another metric for you to track, right? So I think focusing on that is sometimes more important than the less desirable behaviors. Please consider it. And of course, gratitude, right? The gratitude is a huge means of positive reinforcement. I call gratitude free money, right? Because we can give that energy out all day. It doesn't cost anything. Never question if you're overdoing it. Send a million thank yous. If you're questioning, should I send? Yes, send it, even if it feels redundant. It cannot hurt anybody. Thank your team every day, every opportunity, and with specific gratitude, not just thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for taking the time. So all of that, seamlessness, flexible policies, positive reinforcement, those are the practices I see that separate businesses in this arena.
And that overarching theme just seems to keep coming out, is making people feel like people and not like a number, right? Again, whether it's your clients and customers or your internal team, how do we recognize and appreciate that we are all people? And yes, we're working together in some capacity or the other, but we want to make people continue to feel like valuable people, as opposed to just a cog in a wheel, or, you know, a name on a client list or a client number on a client list kind of thing. So I love how this is all sort of coming full circle with a lot of umbrella themes here. But, you know, as we wrap up, Emily, what would you say, or who would you say is really the ultimate responsible individual within an organization for sort of curating and building these client or team member experiences, right? Does it, you know, we've got businesses of lots of different sizes. Some are small one owners, some are, you know, big companies with HR departments. Where do you ultimately feel that responsibility lies?
So always the responsibility for the client and the team member experience lies with every single individual in the organization. But it starts at the top, right? The very, very top, because no one is immune from culture guidelines in your organization. Everyone must participate. And leadership sets the tone and the priorities for the culture. So by leading with commitment to exceptional experiences, leaders can inspire the rest of the team to follow suit. Every team member plays a role in delivering the experiences, but it's leadership's responsibility to ensure that everyone's aligned and committed. Now, that being said, I always recommend assigning a specific team or an individual to manage the project for continuity and focus. When you have many years of culture by default, it's not going to be an overnight shift. And more often than not, it's our human tendency to stay where we're comfortable or to go back to the old way. So these initiatives are the first that get forgotten and neglected. A dedicated team or an individual can help keep things centered and concentrated. I would also recommend building into your experience strategies plans to stay on top of this during your busiest times, because that's when we drop the ball. So having some foresight there can really help.
Do you think it's reasonable to implement something like this on the client side throughout your entire client list? Or is it something that we should start focusing on only our most valuable clients for, and sort of try to trickle down from there? What do you think?
It's tempting to want to stick with the high level clients, right? But implementing this experience for all of your clients is what's going to benefit your business. This is a systemic change. It happens across all boards. However, it might be practical to start with your top tier clients when it comes to gathering feedback, right? Or trying new methods to create feedback, because the clients that are most engaged with your business are the most likely or the most willing to provide that feedback. So it's a great place to start. And then once you have a well-oiled system in place, you can gradually extend the solutions to other client segments.
Awesome. Fantastic. I mean, it's no question that the success of both clients and team members is crucial to building a thriving organization and a high-performing work environment. And Emily, you've given us some fantastic reasons why we need to be intentional and not have a culture by default, and steps to move ahead in curating such experiences. Do you have any final thoughts for the group today that you want to share?
Thank you. It's just my hope that the discussion has started the ball rolling and creating some thought to start about the experience we designed, intentionally or not. Everyone here can recall the best leader they worked with. Everyone here can recall the worst leader they worked with. We also can recall a negative experience we had as a consumer, and we can also recall one that knocked our socks off, right? So this is intuitive to some degree because we all already understand the feelings that come with these experiences. And that's because the saying is true, right? People are going to remember not what you said, but how you made them feel. And as we've discussed, intentionality is really the key here. I so appreciate everyone taking time to hear what I had to say today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
People over profits. That's all I keep saying.
Amen.
So Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to the audience for spending the last hour with us. If there are any topics that you want to see on future office hours, please let us know. We want to keep these being as meaningful and as current as possible for you. I wish everybody a great rest of the day. Stay cool and have a happy and safe weekend. Thank you so much, Emily. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.